spell it for us, please.
First name Richard, last name Guajardo, Guajardo, Richard, common spelling Richard, Assistant Chief, South Patrol Bureau. Good. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I wanted to talk about an incident that occurred on May 3rd in Southwest Austin. On the evening of May 3rd, officers responded to the 6700 block of Old Bee Caves Road due to a report of someone hearing a woman crying. Officers arrived and located a vehicle caught in rushing waters on a low water crossing bridge. Officers quickly created a plan, and Officer Matthew Valli applied a life preserver on and tied a rope to it, as Officers Kevin Peridor and Benjamin Cochran held the other end of the rope. Officer Valli, without hesitation, entered the rushing water and approached the vehicle as it was getting closer to going over the side. Officers removed the first two occupants and were removing the third occupant and their dog when the vehicle continued to move towards the edge of the bridge. Officer Valli was able to get the third occupant and their dog from the vehicle, but all three began to get pulled under the water due to the strong current. Officer Cochran entered the water without hesitation and was able to grab a hold of Officer Valli as he held on to the third occupant and the dog. All were almost to safety when the current pulled the dog and third occupant back out into the water and almost over the edge of the bridge. Officers worked heroically together to hold on to the third occupant and the dog as Officer Kevin Peridor assisted in pulling them out of harm's way. After getting all three occupants and the dog out of the vehicle, a minute later the vehicle went over the side of the bridge. I wanted to have this press conference to introduce you to the two of the three heroes that night, and to reiterate to the public, when there's a storm, flash flooding, especially in this area, Central Texas, to turn around and don't drown. I am just extremely ecstatic and happy that everyone came out of this alive. The officers performed their jobs the way they were trained, heroically, and everything came out with the best outcome that we could have hoped for. I want to give kudos to the Austin Fire Department. They train for this constantly. And for our officers who do have training in this swift water type rescue, we don't do it very often, but for them to immediately go into action mode and to save the three lives of these young ladies, I'm just ecstatic and just very happy that we're here today to talk to two of the three officers. So at this time, I want to introduce Officer Valli, Matthew Valli, and Officer Benjamin Cochran. If you can come up here, please. They'll be able to answer some of your questions.
Officer Benjamin Cochran, BNGAJAMIN COCHRAN 5900. I work Southwest Area Patrol.
What was your night like?
Very wet and very busy. We had lots of collisions and things like that going on, so we were just trying to jump from call to call to assist the citizens of Austin.
Firsthand, do you mind describing this rescue from your perspective?
When we first arrived on scene, we saw the vehicle on the bridge, and the front passenger was leaning out of the passenger window, actually seated up on top of it, and she was screaming for help. And so Officer Valli and I initiated a plan. We got the life preserver and the throw rope, tied it around him. He waded out to the water, and then we started just getting all the occupants out of the vehicle.
Three young ladies and a dog, approximate ages for these people? Or?
Probably around 19, 20, 21 years old.
What were you thinking? I mean, you had a full night of calls already, and then now you're plunging into the water. I mean, what was going through your mind at that time?
Both Officer Valli and I are former lifeguards, and we had training in the military with helicopters, crashes, and things like that in the water. And so we're both on the same mindset about how to act within the water. And we didn't really have time to think. We just applied what we had known. We had some training in the academy as well, throwing the rope to victims. And so we used that training and entered the water and knew how dangerous it is. Even just 2 or 3 feet, the current is so strong it could sweep you off your feet.
How did the occupants react to y'all's presence, and what did they do once you began trying to get them out of there?
The first occupant, when we got her out, the water was still low enough that she was able to walk to us, but then the water started rising very quickly, and I think they realized that they were trapped inside the vehicle and could potentially drown, and so they were very, something that we learned in lifeguard training years ago is that a lot of times true victims of drowning victims, they don't make any sounds. They just cling on to whatever they can, and the best thing to do is try to talk calmly to them and get them to calm down and realize that you need their help in getting them out of the water. So we just tried to calmly talk to them and not to get them to panic is the best thing to do.
Did you manage that? Or did they reach that panic point? Because a lot of times that makes it more difficult to deal with those victims.
Yes and no. By the time that we got the third occupant out, the water was so high, the dog and the occupant had unfortunately knocked Officer Valli over, and so I went in and grabbed him and started dragging him back, and then he tried best he could, but the grip of the water sucked her back out. So I ran in and grabbed her, and then I was caught. And at that point, then I started going into just life-saving mode and not making any sounds and just trying to do the best I could just to brace myself to not go under with her. But Officer Valli grabbed the back of my gun belt and was able to pull me out with the assistance of Officer Peridor, with me pushing my legs and using my upper body trying to drag out. But I think for the most part, we were able to keep the first 2 occupants calm. That answers your question, sir.
How high did the water get at its deepest?
The deepest was probably about waist level, but you have to remember that the water was so strong that I want to say about a minute later, when I was reviewing my video, that it literally pushed the car off the bridge. So a human being that weighs 200 pounds isn't going to stand a chance.
What was your feeling when you saw that happening, just like right after you guys made it out there in the car?
I've been through traumatic experiences before. I was in the military and I was deployed in Iraq, and I honestly just started laughing just because I was happy to be alive and thankful to be alive. I know it sounds weird and crazy, but it's just one of those things that you're on an emotional roller coaster. It just happens to you.
Having heard you say that, you must have felt like you were pretty close.
Oh, yes,
in
sir.
a very desperate situation.
Honestly, if Officer Valli hadn't grabbed the back of my gun belt, I don't think I would have let go of the third occupant, and I probably would have been swept out as well. I don't know if I would have drowned or not, but I certainly felt like I was going to drown. So.
Did you have all your equipment on and everything?
Yes, sir. We did not have time to take our equipment off. It's, like I said, within probably a matter of 30 seconds, the water went from about our knees to our waist level, and it was continuing to rise.
You 2 are former lifeguards, right? You said that?
Yes, sir.
Not every officer is. I mean, how influential and important was that in saving the lives of these young ladies, but also your own in this situation? I mean, did that really make the difference between life and death here, you guys being former lifeguards?
I think with us having former training and saving lives, I mean, I've never done this before. When I was a lifeguard, it was just pulling little kids out of the deep end. But it definitely helped us understand the perspective of the victim and how the most important thing is just to remain calm and not to really try to fight the current, but kind of work with it and try to keep the victim calm, or the occupant, so that you can get them out of the water.
We'll take one last question for Officer Cochran.
How do you all feel? How do you all feel now? It's been a couple days, and you're able to kind of assess what happened. How are you both feeling right now?
I'm feeling very happy that we were able to get them out, and that I really think we were placed there for a reason together in that car and placed at that intersection. We were literally 10 seconds away from them and didn't even realize it until the 911 call came out. But we were put there for a reason, to try to help them and get them out of there.
this is for either of you. I know Officer
Thank you.
Cochran, you said you patrol that area and are familiar with it, but this particular crossing, as we brace for potential flooding the next couple of days, has this been problematic in the past for people, this area?
Yes, I know that they've been working on putting, there's crossing arms like at a railroad track, but it's for flooding areas. With the coming rains that we're about to have, please, it's not worth it. Just turn around, take the extra 5-10 minutes, because it's not worth getting trapped in your car and potentially drowning.
Were there barricades or anything prior to this there?
The barricades had not gone down yet.
Don't wanna swap.
We're gonna have Officer Valli come in. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Officer Matthew Valli. First name is spelled Matthew. Last name is spelled V as in Victor, Alli. I patrol Southwest Austin, and I've been with the department about a year and a half now.
What did you see? What happened?
I just pulled up. I saw a female screaming from the passenger side window of the car, and I was like, we just need to do something now, otherwise they're gonna go over and it's not gonna end well. So I was just, let's formulate a plan, let's get them out, and so that way everybody can at least go home safe.
What did you see in the car, and how, talk about the occupants that you had, because you had several occupants and an animal, a dog or something? How did all that work out?
So when I looked into the vehicle, most of them at the beginning were mostly calm. They were talking with me. It was small things like, okay, who's next? You're gonna be next. Kind of planning with them, working with me. And just after the first occupant got out of the car, you could feel the car moving. Like, I tried to brace myself up against the car, and I kept having to move up closer and closer to the vehicle because I felt it moving away from me. And for the first two occupants, I don't know if with the stress they didn't feel it as much, but once that second occupant came out, there was a large shift in the vehicle, and it just turned into panic mode, kind of, where it was like, I need to get out of this car right now. So as much as you try to work with somebody, it just, you have to do your best. Like he was saying with the lifeguard stuff, we understand when people are you're trying to rescue somebody, the best thing is just try to talk to them as best you can and try to connect with them and just try to get them to work. But
What happened once that panic began to set in within the vehicle?
what happened was it was very difficult to organize. It was saying, hey, look, let's do one at a time. I was trying to tell her we'll start with the dog first, but it was more of, I need to get out of here, my life's at risk. So it was more of just jumping out, and you just got to work with what you got, and then from there we just kept going.
How do you get a dog out of a situation like that? I mean,
I never trained for it, so it was just learning as we go. We just try to grab onto the dog the best I can. I grabbed onto the collar thinking, okay, the collar's gonna be fine. As soon as I grabbed tight onto that collar, the collar just snapped right off. And I was like, trying to get a good grip, but it's very difficult with a dog, having wet fur, and just trying to hold on the best you can.
what kind of dog are we talking about here?
It was probably a medium-sized boxer, something of that sort. I don't know exactly what it was. That's the best thing I could relate it to.
When you see something like that, do you think, I mean, I hate to be rude, but, screw the dog, let's get the people?
So you want to do the best you can. I was, hey, I'm a dog lover myself. I'd be upset. I understand, like, your human life is a little bit more important, but if I can still rescue the dog, I'm still going to try to do my best.
At what point, if you can describe this, did you realize that, not only you had to help these 3 young ladies and this dog, but your own officer was kind of in trouble as well?
So when we went down, I could kind of feel the current kind of sweeping us underneath the car. And my thought was, we just got to get away from the car now. So I just started grabbing onto her and kind of doing one arm, pushing myself back with my one arm and then my 2 legs just to get to the front of the vehicle. And it was at that point, between the water and everything, that just we lost grip. And all of a sudden I see Ben just come diving in, and I was like, oh man, what just happened? And I see him struggling, and I'm like, Ben is probably one of my best friends here at the department. And I was like, God forbid anything happened to him. And I just saw whatever I could grab onto. I saw his belt, and I was like, I'm holding on and I'm not letting go, no matter what.
That had to been, I mean, it was dark. I mean, in the moment, you're like adrenaline, you're doing what you need to do, but when you get home and you sit down, I mean, you kind of go, what was it like when you just kind of had a moment to reflect on what had happened?
I cried. It was a lot. It was a lot to take in. I realized I could have died. Other people could have died right there in front of me. And it was just something I needed to sit down and embrace and just kind of think about it for a while.
Last question.
How do you move forward from that? I mean, now that you've been in that situation, it was really tight, really close. You know, next time it's still raining outside.
Just do your best. I'm back here my next day at work. I had the weekend, luckily, to recoup. But here I am back at work, and I'm ready to go again, and that's all I can do. I just move on from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Well done.